I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Before we begin, we'll just swear in the parties.
You swear? Could you please state your name?
Brittany Santucci.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Could you please state your name?
Newcomb?
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kelsey. The first item on our docket is 1360 Keniston Boulevard. The issue is assessed value. And Ms. Santucci, when you're ready. Thank you.
This is file number 19-493, roll number 10006-776-065, address is 1360 Keniston Boulevard. This is a collision center, vehicle service related. Actually, your bill was 2017. And we have a gross leasable area of 18,933 square feet. If you turn to my page 2, just some aerial shots of the property. So it's located on Keniston Boulevard at the corner of Rothwell Road. I just have the one exterior photo at the bottom. And if we turn to page 3, I just have some interior photos just of the space. Where the vehicles are worked on. On page 4, just some more photos, office space on the bottom. And then on page 5, just of the front reception area. On page 6, so there's no request for income information just due to the fact that in 2017 it would have still been land when the mailers were originally mailed out. And we have no subject sale history. For the subject property leases, again, I've gone over, there's no income expense to go over, but that's just because it was never sent. And the property, I think, yeah, so it was vacant until October 30th. And then just the new construction. So the tenant is a collision center. They have services that they provide for auto repair, structural, bodywork, vehicle detailing, and part sales, and it's owner occupied. So on page 7, I have the vehicle, the income stream. We have a rent applied, $14.41 per square foot. We're using a 4% vacancy loss. Again, we've already gone over 2% expenses this year for the city and a shortfall of $4.50 per square foot. The capitalization rate applied to this property is 6.4%. So it gives us an estimated value of $3,957,000. On page 8 is rent comparables for vehicle-related properties. I have 34 comparables here. They vary they range from as low as $7.63 all the way up to, I think 28 was the highest. This is just our entire list, so I would say like some of the newer ones and larger ones would be most comparable. Our average is $13.98 and the median is $12.75, which is lower than what the models applied to this property, but this property also is a recent build. On page 9 is just the income value summary. Page 10 is the model derived capitalization rates. Unfortunately, we don't have a property type for vehicle service related. And on page 11 is Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 12 is just the permit value permit details from 2016 here. This is the foundation permit. Page 13 shows the permit to construct the new building. And on page 14 is my 2020 Board of Revision addenda. I'm sure everybody's gone over this. So page 16 is just the fresh look. Page 17 is the capitalization rate evidence, just additional. And page 18 is the non-recoverable, just to the study here to confirm our using 2% non-recoverable allowance. And 19 is the IAAO standards. And my recommendation today is to maintain the 2020 assessed value of the $3,957,000. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Yes, your valuation, page 7, I guess.
Yes.
Is this all done by the model?
Yes, it's all model drive.
Vehicle service garage.
Yes.
And the rents selected on page 8, who selected those?
I just selected them from our database of rents. I just included all of them.
These are all listed as vehicle service garage.
Yes.
So I note a number of these are, like, they vary a lot in style and type, correct? Like,
Yes, some of them are older, some of them are like a more small scale.
and for example, number 31 is office.
31, or,
It's Boyd's office, correct?
um,
You've heard this story before.
I haven't.
No?
No.
Okay.
You're about to.
Sorry.
And number 32 is a dealership, correct?
The auto trailer, is that? I think the auto gallery would be.
So how many of these are actually body shops, do you know?
Let's see here. Number 6.
All right,
And, I think number 10 does body work.
how about number 16?
That one I'm not sure, but
Okay.
wait, yes, so I think 16 I have is a Boyd auto body.
Right.
Yep, and then some of them are just, I would say like the tenant's name, so I'm not sure of the exact services. 30, comparable 32, I think is.
Well, that's a used car dealership.
Is that the one, or was it the one, okay, sorry, I must have
30
the numbers.
31 is
mixed up.
Boyd's office.
Okay, let's just see here what I.
Now, one of yours at 2140 McPhillips is a Boyd. I don't know which one it is, though.
Okay, let me see here, just mixed up my numbers. I think I'm missing. Would be number 30. 31.
Well, that's the office.
So is it,
It's just, you have one, you have 3 listed at 2140 McPhillips, and I'm wondering if you know which one of those is the Boyd.
so 2140?
Yeah, one of them is a Boyd. I just don't know which one of yours it is. You have 4.
What? Number 29 is not the Boyd.
Okay,
Number 25, I think I have as a car rental.
yeah.
And number 18, I just have as a name, so I'm not
I
sure.
think it's a larger unit. You might not have it here.
Okay.
Now, on number 6, do you know how that rent was calculated? 1375, the basis for which the rental agreement was made? Here?
I wouldn't have the basis of the rental agreement, I would just have what's filled out on the income and expense
Okay, so
questionnaire.
you weren't aware that the arbitration and the lease involved setting a rate of retail, not for body shop?
No, that would be not provided on the tenant form.
The shortfall in the model is 450,
Yes.
and I'm wondering if you've calculated the actual tax rate per square foot.
I did not calculate the actual tax rate.
But
tax rate.
shortfall is comprised of paying the taxes, the utilities, and some maintenance when the place is vacant, correct? Okay. You brought costs, and I'm looking at page 4 and wondering if you can identify what sort of building construction this is.
Not what's listed on the front page.
Oh.
I think it would be a metal,
Metal
normally we don't
pre-engineered.
use the wood or steel framed for
Right,
this one, we would use a different,
Metal pre-engineered.
yes.
And did you at any point compare the permit costs to other estimates of value for constructing metal pre-engineered buildings?
Do you mean if I compared it to other? Like, I never added this building to the roll. I wouldn't have reviewed
Okay.
the cost workup on it.
Oh, so you didn't go through the costs at all then?
Well, we're dealing with the income, so.
No, I
should go through-
know, I just,
Yeah.
you brought them forward as evidence, and so I get to ask you questions, right?
Okay,
So you never went through the costs, you're not aware of the project?
I briefly went through the permits, and I've added other dealerships, and it seems similar to some of the other ones I've added, but.
Dealership though, but this isn't a dealership, right? This is a body shop.
No, it's a body shop, yeah.
Right, okay. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Laronde?
This is, yeah, this building's strictly for body shop. 26-foot ceilings in it, correct?
That's what it says on the front page.
You
Again,
got
I've
any
never.
other body shops with 6-foot ceilings?
I'm trying to think. I think I had one on Portage with high ceilings. I couldn't remember off the top of my head what the height was though. And I can't remember, I added one on Sargent that had high ceilings. I'm not sure if the 26 is correct, but again, that would be more related to the cost, not the income, so.
Also the expense, correct?
Do you mean in regards to heating? and
Heating.
cooling?
26-foot ceilings.
I'd say it'd be typical for, I feel like most of the auto body ones, the newer ones are, seems to be similar height.
And your permit, is that, is that the total permit for construction on this property?
So it's separated into two. The first one is the foundation.
And
So
which page is
page
it on?
12, it's just the permit for foundation, and that one was for $1 million. And then the permit for the construct, the new auto would be page 13.
330,
So that one shows for, yeah, the new.
339,000.
Yes.
That's $1.3 million. So that was in the total cost plus the land.
Yes, but there was no land sale
You
to go
didn't have a
on.
land sale on it.
No.
You didn't bring any land values for that area?
No, because there was no additional land value for this property. I would say the average from just doing land in that area ranges all the way from $15 up to $30, depending on the size and location. So it's kind of a wide range.
I've got no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Page?
So the cap rate is model driven,
Yes, it's not driven.
and would that model include the types of properties you've included here as rent comparables?
I can't speak to exactly what properties were used, but they would have some sort of, they review sales for vehicle service garages, and I'm assuming that's what they would look at when coming up with the cap rate. And then this one would also be based on the age and size, some of the other factors that go into it.
Do you believe that they are looking narrowly at body shops or vehicle service garages, which in my
I
mind
think it
would
would
be
be a various amount. I don't think it would be specifically just one type.
Okay. And then the capitalization rate table, your page 10, of course, this doesn't fall neatly
No.
in any of them. Would you have sort of a range, or if you had to choose one of these, what would it fall in?
They're providing a retail service. And I guess in regards to a range, I feel like for the VSGs I've dealt with, they range from around like a 6 to possibly in the 7s. I haven't dealt with a bunch of them, but I find the newer ones are obviously on the lower end. But I would think it would fall more into a retail category if I had to pick on the chart, but that's about it.
All right, I have no other questions, thanks.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Did you inspect this property?
This one I haven't been in, no.
Okay. And did
It
you,
was-
did you take these photographs, or
No.
who took the photographs then?
I think I took these ones from online, the person who inspected it for new construction, because normally I put a date by it if it's one of our workers,
Okay,
so I think I just took these ones from online, there was no photos in our system.
all right, thank you very much. Mr. Newcomb?
I have a minor amount of rebuttal, and I'll just blend it in my thing, if that's fine, it's verbal. I know you're not going to consider generally the costs on it, although it's kind of prejudicial. The construction type is a metal pre-engineered building, and it was erected by Thomas Builders. Now, on Sunday, I got a quote from an ex-Thomas Builders project manager now working at Gateway on a very, very similar construction for another project. And my price was $120 to $140 a square foot. So that's the actual cost of the real estate. Everything after that, that was incurred is a business expense, and this site was built to suit for a body shop. The property is owned by the, I always forgot the name of the family, dealt with them a couple of times. So they used to own Direct Transport, and they had the cross-dock facility right behind this, and they sold the land up front where the Mercedes dealership is on. And when this all happened several years ago, they had an option on the corner spot for building their body shop. So they kept that vacant until the Mercedes dealer was ready to build their body shop. And the deal then was that they were, the landowner was going to build to suit their project and do a lease back to them. And it was a lot of non-realty expenses in the cost to construct. And the lease was specific, very specific. It said all the costs capitalized at 8%, right in the lease. Well, there was no ambiguity about it. It's a true 8%. Now, the rent is higher than that, than the market, because they were paying for all the infrastructure and equipment related to the operation, which is not taxable, nor is it real estate. But that's the deal. So we have to look back to the market to see what rents this should charge. And on page 3 are some auto-related rents, and I'm only going to focus on a handful here. The auto body rents, starting with 2535 Inkster. It's not in the city of Winnipeg, it's on the outskirts in Rosser. This was a former Peterbilt dealership that was converted to doing auto body work on highway tractors. And that's at $8 for 20,000 feet. And the date is, this rent was expired, but it did renew at the same amount. 700 Morey is rented from Arm's Length to Eastside, and that rent is $6. Moving down to Dudley, those ones in Pembina are not auto body, they're just labeled wrong. On Dudley, there's beginning of the 3 voids. One is the one the assessor pointed out at 815, another site in King Edward at 842, and then Scurfield, which is the one at the corner of Scurfield and Dover Court. There's a former egg hatchery, went up for sale, and Boyd purchased it. The rent is $905. I asked the assessor a question earlier about her one comp for 2405 Pembina, and that's how I came in possession of these Boyd rents, because I did the arbitration work on that site. And that one is not an auto body rent. The lease actually specifically called for a value based on its use, not its use as an auto body shop. That was the renewal rate, and it's in a retail strip with the Tim Hortons in the front, and as such, it was impacted by the potential that they could get for a retail rent, not an auto body rent. So that's why we've never used that one. And I think the other two, the assessor pointed out, we have no problem with any of them. An auto body shop is not a big box, it's not a dealership, it's industrial. There's no other word to describe it, because it's all service. We bring in cars, take them apart, you paint them, and you put them back together. That's industrial. And we did go to the highest end of the range at $10 to reflect the location and the age of the site. But there's as an alternate use, there's not somebody who's gonna come in and pay $14 to rent a body shop. Now, having said that, I just heard about a brand new one being built. It's crazy, but it's so post-reference, it won't matter. That'll be something we'll have to talk about in 4 years' time on that. But the $10 rent is, as I said, at the highest end of the scale. We're looking at this as predominantly an industrial thing, and we've looked at the industrial rates overall in the city of Winnipeg are vacancy, 7.2%. In Fort Garry, they're lower because it is a desirable area. So we come up with a blended rate of 4.9% for an industrial use. There are non-recoverables associated with this site. There's a lot of non-recoverables, and it has to do with the image of the site. Simply to keep it where it's at it's not something that you can neglect. We're applying 5% structural reserve. Now, arguably, structural reserve on a property like this, because of the style of construction, may be a fair bit lower, because Thomas does nothing but build pitched metal pre-engineered roofs, which don't really have a major structural concern for them. So I would say that could be a bit on the high side. The shortfall, however, we've calculated, and we've calculated it below. Now, that's based on the tax load from last year, $298 a foot just for taxes. If the assessment goes to $3.9 million, the taxes are $5.02 a square foot for shortfall, which then you have to add utilities and an allowance for repair and maintenance. So all of a sudden you're at a shortfall of $10. And as I was just saying in the other room, your shortfall's got to equal your property type. You can't pluck one out and apply one rate to everything. If you're demanding a rent that's at the high end of the market, well, your taxes go up, which means your shortfall goes up. It's a circular argument. So we're sticking it with our number at $743, but I caution that the assessor's shortfall rate would actually be about $10 based on an actual calculation. So our NOI at $159,582, and we're using the cap rate from the lease, which is, I have that on page 5. Look at that. Total land cost, total building costs, Heckles, that's the name. The Heckle family are the landlords, and this is the deal they struck. But it was a captive audience, and Mercedes really had nowhere else to go, and it was next door, and it was a build-to-suit. But they made it's a business decision, but it was an 8% rate. In terms of other properties to look at, on page 39 to 40, we have a number of industrial rates, which would be the ones I would select for capitalization, and the range is in there. Not anyone in particular to look at, but the whole multitude of rates would suggest that we're on the right track here. Lastly, the concept of a body shop is generally restricted by planning department. On page 21, this is the current principal use table in Winnipeg's planning bylaw, and underneath it, under about the 4th category is private motor vehicle related, and the category we're looking at is auto, light truck, motorcycle repair and service, and you'll notice that it's permitted asterisk. And there are site-specific standards. Auto body shops, they used to be a specific amount, one that was restricted M2 and M3 zoning, and now it is permitted, but there are requirements and very difficult to get a permit an occupancy permit on a body shop when you're anywhere near retail or say residential areas. In this case, they're not near a residential area. That had to do with the old style of painting that had a lot of fumes. The new style does not. However, it is still quite restricted, and you won't see a body shop near residential areas unless it's been grandfathered in. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Santucci, any questions?
I just have a question about page 5. So I was under I assumed that it was common ownership. So you're saying that there's a rent in place,
Yes.
but you're not providing the rent to
No,
us?
it was a development rent. It was all the cost. It was built to suit.
So
it's
the
not a-
capitalization rate is based on the cost, but you're
Right.
applying it to the income approach?
Yeah, well, right, and the only valid market indicator in this whole deal is the cap rate. It isn't the cost to build or the cost to rent, because that's based on an arbitrary value for the land and non-realty items for the construction.
So how did they determine this 8%?
I don't know. It's what the landlord and tenant negotiated on.
Okay, but not providing any details on what the rent they're paying? Okay, and then for your auto-related comparables, are any of them built after 1990?
Oh, yeah, Squarefield. The bottom one, I think 700 Moray, not entirely sure about King Edward.
I'm sorry,
I
what
have
page
those-
are you referring to?
On
Page
page 3. Okay, I just had those as dates prior to 1990 in our system. And then you had spoke about an email with cost to construct. Do you have that email?
Oh, no, it wasn't an email, it was an interview, which I did on Sunday, yes.
Okay, and so the cost to construct, he stated for the similar type of building with all the finishes?
Yeah, I was actually looking for a quotation for a metal pre-engineered building, 14,000 square feet. And with, and the number was between 120 and 140, and that would be including site costs as well.
Okay, but you don't have that with you?
No.
Okay, and then just my last question is, so last year, it was a 7.5% cap. So you're saying that the risk has increased this cycle?
No, it was post-reference last year.
Okay,
I didn't enter it in evidence because it was post-reference.
but you did ask for a 7.5% cap last year.
Well, it was for a part year, and the Mercedes dealership was assessed at, I think, $11 a foot and a 7.5% cap. And I said, well, it's part and parcel of it, so we're content with that this year, and then the board applied it.
Okay, so you think that the 8% cap, this building is like, there's a lot of risk involved with it, it deserves the higher cap rate?
Well, I think the market would show that it's not a retail facility, and it's an industrial facility, and the concept of alternate use then comes in for this. I wouldn't necessarily say that the difference of 0.5 point of cap is something that you would say is an increase in risk. It was, like I said, I had the best cap in the world for application, which is the subject itself, which I couldn't use until it was within the reference period.
Okay, that's all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Page?
I have none, thank you.
Mr. Laronda?
So the evaluation that you had at the $120 to $140 a square foot, that was just for the building, correct?
Yeah.
And that would put it around, well, the 140 would put it around 2,600,000, the other one would put it around 2,275,000.
Right, and that's the cost to construct, right?
Yeah, so that's cost to construct. So there'd still be the land value to add onto that.
Certainly.
And
And then there would be depreciation
Yeah.
to subtract.
Yeah,
I forgot what the land value was that was applied to it. Off the top of my head, I don't recall.
but it is around a $25 a square foot, isn't it? In that area?
No, it wasn't that high. They had made the deal back when they bought the other land. The other land closed at, it was at a strange rate because it was about bit under 600 an acre, and responsibility for closing costs went to purchaser, but they ended up not being very large. So no. I don't have it there. Oh, I do have the scope of service on the construction and the design build stipulated price contract on the site.
That'd be around 339.
No, I don't have that.
Well, $1,339,000.
Well, no, I'm thinking and wanting to say $800,000 was the allocation for the land.
So that still puts it close to the 3 million.
Right, but then depreciation, I mean, these people sell cars, right? You know what happens when you
No, they don't sell cars here, they fix them.
But when you buy a car and you bring it back the next day, what do they tell you?
It's depreciated by 20%.
Exactly. Same joke everywhere.
Okay, but so what's the depreciation on that 3 million? It's just.
Well, it's gonna be functional, not functional, economic obsolescence first and foremost.
Yeah.
Because if you're not hooked up to the dealership next door and you're doing a standalone, what's it really worth? All the ones that are going up now are affiliated with the exception of East Side's place on Marion, they're all affiliated with the dealership. And because that's where you're getting your volume from. If you sell the car, you service the car, you do the body work on the car. So if you don't have that link, you're gonna suffer an obsolescence factor to somebody else. And that's a business issue, not a real estate issue. Would somebody, the question to ask is, would somebody who didn't have the business link spend that sort of money to build a body shop from spec? No. East Side, when they did their expansion, I did their work for them, and I think the number was somewhere around $100 a foot on the expansion.
Okay, so like, it's part of the Mercedes economic unit.
Correct.
So would it not fall under the same economic unit as far as rent then? Because the other ones, you were saying that the other one's at $11 a square foot.
Well, that's what we argued last year, and what happened this year is like I said, we did have a separate number, it's on a separate title. It's not, it's a leased fee instead of a fee simple. That's a reasonable thing, and I can't even remember what Mercedes came in at for value. I think it was $11 a foot on rent and 7.5 cap this year. I haven't seen the appeal papers yet, so maybe the city's gonna, I don't know, do you have any insight?
It's just looking at your page 5 with an 8% cap that they constructed. They constructed it to show themselves a return on their investment for the building that they had to construct and the return they wanted on the land.
Yes.
So it's a false number, the 8%.
No, the false number.
Because they said this is what we want for revenue.
No,
Or
it's a
return.
true number because it did represent cash changing hands.
Yeah,
But where it's a false number is the costs included cash for non-realty items.
Right.
So when we see properties like this, you say the rent and the sale and the cost aren't market, but what's wrong with the cap as a market? Because all we are is dealing with the expected return on a real estate related investment. And incidentally, on that basis, we're not uncomfortable with looking at as part of the greater Mercedes economic unit as part of it, which again was $11 and a 7.5% cap.
yeah.
But this year, we just thought, we had the 8%, right?
But that would put it closer to 3.2 million.
No, it wouldn't. We put it about 2.3 million, because that's exactly what the number is from last year. $11 rent, 7.5 cap is 2.3 million, 2.353, because that's exactly what was applied last year.
Or when you came up with.
And I know you're not allowed to talk about orders from last year.
No,
I
not.
heard there was a memo. But I have that here.
No, we don't want to see it.
No, of course not.
But what I'm trying to get to is, a value. And I'm saying, is it not more appropriate to tie it to an economic unit than separating it and using an 8% cap that's...
Okay,
I'm
well-
having trouble justifying your 8%
Oh,
cap.
okay, if you're going to do that, that's fine, but it's also gonna bring down the value of the greater economic unit because we have a more inferior portion of it, which is an auto body shop versus a showroom. A dealership is roughly 50% service and 50% display. Now, if you add another ratio to it, and now you become 70% service and 30% display, so you should be dropping your rental rate. And would you raise your cap as a result? You would think that is something to consider as well. So on a blended rate, I think we might be looking at, say, 1050 and 775 on both sides of it. But I am viewing it as a standalone, and as I said, we have the 8% return, and I'm not living in a fantasy world when it comes to caps. People expect returns on their money, and the notion that 6% is a decent rate of real estate return is misleading. It is if you borrow money at 2%, but the rest of the world borrows a lot higher, and that's why you've got to make the spread on your borrowed money. That's simple real estate math.
I'm good. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, no, that's
Shouldn't be
fine.
getting into debate.
That's fine, I have no questions, so we'll move on to 176 Watson Street. Ms. Santucci, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. This is file number 19-4531. Roll number 05009 042000. Address is 176 Watson Street. This is a car wash. It was, the first portion of it was built in 1983, and then there was another portion built in 2010. We have a leasable area of 13,152 square feet. If you turn to page 2, I have an aerial shot of the property located on Watson, corner of Watson and Kingsbury Avenue, just off of McPhillips. Exterior photo at the bottom. On page 3 is just some interior photos. We have the self-serve car wash. We also have the automatic car wash. There's a spot where you can wash your dog, and then there's a laundromat. And on page 4, just showing the request for information, request for income information, the subject sale history, and the subject property lease, just to show, from my understanding, it was owner occupied, and then just to state that it's a car wash. There's the Touchless, there's the self-serve bays, the laundromat, and the dog wash. So on page 5 is the vehicle car wash income workup. So we have different leasable areas for different spaces in the building. We get a blended rate of $7.84 per square foot. And we have the vacancy loss at 2%, expenses at 2%, and then the shortfall's at $4.50 per square foot. And our overall capitalization rate is 6.55% for this property. And we come up with the estimated market value of $1,494,000. For the car washes, we don't have many rents. We just have the 2 here. So there's the $14.50 from McPhillips and $7.72 for Pembina Highway. I would say typically, the properties I've looked at in our system, most of the car washes come in around $7 to $10 depending on how new they are. So this one's at the lower end. So our income value summary is on page 6. Page 7 is the model, the capitalization rates, model derived. 8 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts, and on page 9 is the start of the 2017 income and expense questionnaire. I think if we turn to page 13 is the first page. Since it's owner occupied, they've provided some information here. So they just have provided revenues. The expenses at the bottom, I'm assuming, would be related to the property that I've gone over. And again, so the income they've provided us is not based on rent, so the net operating income is not based on rent. And then on page 16 is just the 2020 Board of Revision addenda information that we've gone through. So my recommendation today is to maintain the 2020 assessed value of the $1,494,000. Thank you. That's my
Thank you very
presentation.
much. Mr. Newcomb, do you have any questions?
Yes, page 5, this valuation done by the model.
Yeah, it's all model derived.
And at the bottom of the page, you have car washes. What sort of car washes are these?
The Northgate one would be self-serve and,
Isn't it a drive-through?
I mean, well, you would do it yourself. You just drive into the bay.
The 1361 McPhillips?
Is that not the one that's behind the mall where you just
I
drive through?
thought at one time I appraised it, and it's a pad site drive-through car wash, but maybe I'm mistaken.
No, I had it on appeal. It's just like bays. And then Pemina, the True Blue one, I would assume it would just be the self-serve, but
And that's for which section of this, the 8,000 square feet?
I think that's the largest portion would be associated with the bays, yes. It's all broken up into different, unfortunately, for
Right, and the
retail
other,
convenience.
the other sections of it being a laundromat, et cetera,
Yes.
you've got no rents for those, have you?
No, we've just put it all under the one vehicle car wash. I'm not sure why we didn't do a separate retail income stream.
Well, but, or you haven't brought rent comparables either, have you?
No,
No dog wash, car wash?
I don't know. I don't think that's a very common feature. I think there's a few,
There's
but,
a new car coming out that has it built in.
oh, I can only think of two in the city, this one and another one that have the dog wash, so.
Okay. So no comps on that, okay. And I don't suppose you have any cap rates on it either then, on any of these types of properties?
No, I would assume retail cap rates could vary between, obviously, like the ranges we have listed on our larger sheet, and with rents, I would assume that convenience stores would possibly be higher, and then laundromats, I would think would be around the $7.84 from previous ones I've looked at.
In relation to capitalization rates, isn't a capitalization rate calculation of the risk over the expected period that returns will be given?
Yes.
And also fair to say that properties that are impacted by a lot of moisture have shorter lifespans than properties that do not?
I would think so, depending on how tightly it was sealed with a car wash, the moisture's always escaping, I feel like, for the self-serve portion and.
You've read possibly municipal board decisions on a car wash, specifically 3109 Pembina?
No, I have not.
But so if a property has a shorter lifespan, you would think that
There'd be
then,
more.
that there'd be a need to try to recoup your revenue quicker, which means a higher cap?
I haven't really heard of a lot of, like in my own personal experience, car washes being torn down due to old age, but they seem to just continue to go on and on.
These are my questions, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Laurando?
On your page 5, what is the C2 standard office, 865 square feet? Where do you get that 1014 rent from?
It would kind of be based on economies of scale, and that's why it'd be higher than the other ones. So,
Or would it not be comparable to some of the other ones? But-
so I think what they did is they separated the premise, because at first when I looked at this, I was kind of curious why they all just weren't under one premise, but it was due to the fact that there's like the laundry station inside, there's different, it's like very compartmentalized, if you can see on my page 2, how each addition or kind of like different section of the building.
Doesn't that just make it more awkward?
Yes, but I would assume, the smaller portion, from my understanding, was to do with like the entrance area where you'd pay and stuff. And then the storage is coming in lower. I'm not sure, I didn't write down exactly which ones they're linked to based on the building, but the 10 would just be higher based on the smaller square footage.
So this is considered sort of like a car service
There's,
Building.
I didn't realize it had all the other stuff when I first got it, I thought it was just a car wash, and then I looked into the other services it offers.
But I've never, even on the last building, you didn't change for the office space within that building, you didn't do a separate rent for the office.
We normally have those ones listed as one economic, so we have all of them, like the Boyd's, all the auto bodies and car things, we incorporate the office space and all that into the rent as one. This one, I'm guessing because it's an older building, it was all separated out. Sometimes people, instead of, when there's an addition, instead of merging premises, they leave them separate, so that also could have been the reason they're all separated. But when I looked at the blended rate of $7.84, I thought that was a fair overall value for them, the property.
And your cap rate, you said you used retail?
For this one here, obviously we have it under the vehicle car wash, and we don't have like a property type for it on the capitalization rate, so I'm not sure where it would fall under this here.
Maybe under neighborhood?
Possibly one of the retail components, yes.
Yeah, so, under there you go, under retail and neighborhood would be 6.15 to 9.40.
Yeah, yes.
It's not really neighborhood though, is it?
No.
It's more,
It'd be community shopping.
more community
Yeah.
shopping.
Or, I don't even know if it'd be a strip mall, but
Yeah.
it's tough when we don't have a separate property type for it.
So which, I guess the office part would probably be one of the oldest parts in the building, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be that back, that little piece back in the front, or the back?
I thought the original self-serve was the oldest part of the building. But I didn't go
So
through
that would be the
cost
office.
data. I thought that was the larger 8,000 square foot portion. I thought the touchless car wash was added more recently, but,
But you said it was 800 square feet for the office, 865 square
so
feet.
that could be a part of the original portion of the 8,000 square foot self-serve.
That piece with the angle on the front,
Yes.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
It's still a service door at back. Is it actually an office, or is it part of the, part
I
of
would
the-
say it's more of like a, like your typical
it's
sort of
just
when
where
you
you
walk
walk
in
in.
and you pay,
Yeah,
and then
so
they have
it's-
like options to
It's
buy
almost like a
things.
kiosk.
Yeah, then I guess for change for the laundromat or something, maybe they provide, but nothing.
Isn't that a pretty expensive rate for a place that just hands out change?
It would just, again, be based on the economies of scale. If I were to merge them together, it would probably come in more at, like if I were to add that 800 into, let's say, the 1,100, it would still probably stay around the $9.88.
Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Pitch?
I have no thank you.
And did you inspect the property?
This one I have not been into, but we had a coworker inspect it.
And when was that inspected?
I think it was LaCycle, the person who dealt with the appeal.
Okay, and were these pictures taken by the person who inspected the property?
It would have been the person who inspected, yes.
So it was inspected for the 2018 session?
2018, yes, there was.
Thank you. Mr. Newcomb?
Just a quick follow-up, confirm that all 13,152 square feet, even though you have 5 records, are one owner user?
Yes.
Okay. And if they were all lumped together and as one, the rent per square foot would decrease overall based on the economy of scale, considering the model?
If we were to have them all at 13,000 with a rate per square foot, it could be a lower number, but again, I had said with our blended rate, it's $7.84, so that is a lower rate
Thank you.
combined.
Mr. Newfeld, when you're ready for your presentation?
Yeah, we're not that far off from the assessor in terms of the rental value, and I think we had the same difficulty of finding comparables for a very, very unique property. We ended up with $7 in the car wash and $8 in the addition, and I could point you to a lot of stuff like some industrial rents and some car wash, some non-car wash rents, users. But by the way, this rate we have here, the number where it adds up, those numbers weren't extended properly. The 8063 was 13,152, and our blended rate is some less. Is $7.39 a foot, so about a 50-cent difference. We're applying vacancy as we looked at before, and hard to say what we'd put for a vacancy on a property like this. It's a unique type. It's definitely not retail and it's not industrial, but it's nothing, those are the two closest to it. So we just looked at a blended rate of that, and it's higher. But it is, at least it's market driven. The shortfall was calculated from our estimates of actuals. Applied to non-recoverable, it's owner occupied. Again, there's no doubt in my mind that the non-recoverables on property like this are very, very high. The greatest enemy to any building, any improvement, is moisture. And the property is loaded with moisture, two sources, car washing and laundromat. And the moisture penetrates everything and reduces the life of any property. In residential, if you get moisture in your walls, they rot. And I would love to spend an hour or two explaining what happened to my house when I opened the wall up. And $200,000 later, I had the entire wall that had to be replaced. But that's a lawsuit for another day. Anyway, the moisture just reduces the life. The average lifespan of a car wash is about 20 to 25 years versus an industrial property at 35 to 45 and retail at 40 to 60 years. It's just a shorter lifespan, and that leads us into cap rates. With a shorter lifespan, you've got to put pressure to recover your earnings, to cover the cost of building it, and your cap rates drive up. A cap rate, the math in a cap rate generally assumes a lifespan of at least 35 years. So that's 35 years of income and a hypothetical sale at the end, and that's what goes into the creation of a cap rate. So when you knock 10 years off it, you have to have a higher return because you got to make the same amount of money in 25 years instead of 35 years. So on this basis, there are no cap rates of car washes. They're owner occupied. They sell on that basis. When they're done, they get demolished and you start all over. They get bought and sold. You can't use direct comparison because they always get bought and sold on the basis of how much revenue they generate, not on the real estate. And I've done probably a dozen car wash appraisals in my life, and it's always based on how many dollars get put into the slots for car washes, nothing at all to do with the real estate. So on this basis, we're really lacking in market data. The last time I took one to the municipal board, we argued on income and we argued on cost, and it ended up being applied on cost simply because they couldn't come to a conclusion. And the last one I remember being brought in was around 2005 or 2006. So on the cost approach, of course, that gives us a whole new set of problems because we have to do depreciation, which is accelerated. So our value is based on a less direct relationship to the market, just following the principles, and we believe a slightly lower rent and a cap rate to account for a lower life. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Santucci, any questions?
I just have questions in regards to the quality and condition numbers applied to the cap rate for the property. Is it just that it's
We're
a
expecting.
poor quality building and a...
No, it just had, it's the lifespan. there's no way you're going to have a good condition car wash the minute you open the door. All sorts of issues. The newest modern one I've ever seen has had, they work very hard on the inside drainage, but in the winter in Canada, they're ice damming and having lifting and heaving outside of the slab. That's the nature of the business.
That was my only question, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peach?
I have no, thank you.
Mr. Miranda?
I have none, thank you.
And I have no questions. Our next item is 2544 Main Street. The issue is amount of assessed value. When you're ready, Ms. Santucci.
Thank you. This is file number 19-253, roll number 05003-289-500. Address is 2544 Main Street. We have a gas station, actual year built is 1989, and we have a leasable area of 3,512 square feet. If you turn to page 2, just an aerial shot of the photo, it's located at the corner of Main and Red River Boulevard in the Riverbend, I guess where all the stores that are kind of located, just on the outskirts of the residential neighborhood. I have 2 exterior photos there, just showing the gas station. Page 3, I just have the request for income and expense information, no subject sale history. And for the subject property leases, the income and expense provided us with a rent of $86,100 for the 3,502 square feet, which works up to $24.59 per square foot for a 5-year lease. And I'll get to comparing it to ours on page 4. We have the income workup for the store kiosk with pumps. Our rent applied is $31.37, and that's to the 2,110 square feet of the store kiosk pump area. We have vacancy loss of 2%, expenses at 2%, shortfall at $6, and capitalization rate at 6.3%. And then we have the additional building value for the tanks and pumps and shelter at $264,000 for a total of $1,269,000. On page 5, I have the car wash income workup. We've applied a rate of $8.84 per square foot, and that's to 1,402 square feet. We have vacancy at 2%, expenses at 2%, shortfall at $4.50, and a capitalization rate of 5.55% for $212,000. On page 6, I just have our gas station car wash pad site comparable rents. So this property would be most similar to comparable one, similar store area with a car wash, and comparable 12, again, just over 2,000 square foot store with a car wash. Those ones come in at $40.25 and $42.92. So if we turn to page 7, I have the income value summary. So our model our model potential rent is $78,584, which is slightly lower
Pardon me.
than the rent at on the mailer, and we have a capitalization rate of 6.17% and an estimated market value after adding both income streams together with the additional income for $1,481,000. If we turn to page 8, it's the capitalization rates. We'll turn to page 10 to the 2017 income and expense questionnaire. When you get to page 14, it's just the lease in place, so it just shows the area of 3,502 square feet at $24.59. And if we get to the annual statement, on page 15, they have a net income of $84,808, so slightly higher than what we have applied for the property. And for page 16 is the 2020 Board Revision Addenda I've gone over. So my recommendation today is to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $1,481,000. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Newcomb?
Yes, page 4 and 5, are these all done by the model? And 7 as well, sorry.
Yes.
You know, when you apply the model, I've been told that there are breaks for deciding cap rates based on the area. So doesn't the effect of splitting this into 2 revenue streams artificially drive your cap rate down?
We have the 2 different cap rates, so having the lower cap rate on,
Well, no, that's not the question, is this, if your cap rate, as I've been told, declines as the building size goes down, if the more revenue streams you put on it, you end up having a collection of smaller parts at lower caps instead of the property as a whole. Wouldn't your model, if you added those 2 up, show a higher cap?
I'm not sure, I haven't heard anything about the gas stations, the cap rate being changed on the
I
sides.
heard an assessor admit it this morning, so.
Most of the ones I have the same capitalization rate, unless the age was more of the thing I noticed. Anything over 2,000 possibly had a 6.15, but anything older was 6.3. From my experience with them, it's been based on age.
On page 4, what is the additional building value for?
It is for the pumps, tanks, and shelter.
Pumps, tanks, shelter, and is that done on the cost approach?
Yes.
And you know what it was 2 years ago?
I did not write down what it was previously, no.
Okay, well, would it be fair to expect this item to depreciate in value?
Hypothetically, over 2 years, yes, there would be some depreciation.
And what's the lifespan of these items, do you know?
I'm speaking from just trying to remember the last gas station I added, possibly 30 years for the tanks. I don't
Do
have
you
any.
know when the tanks were put in the ground?
I'm guessing 1989, unless anything has been changed since then. I'm not sure if there's like
No.
maintenance or anything on tanks or how that works.
And as far as capitalization rates, does your model account for environmental issues?
No, it doesn't.
So everybody knows if you have an environmental registration that registered against the property, it likely has an effect on market value though, doesn't it?
Is there some, I couldn't, there was nothing on file that said there was
But
any.
your model doesn't account for it, you don't have any way to input to say that
Well,
registration.
we could do something manually.
Right.
If they bring forward a contamination document from the province, they've had issues and whatnot, or,
Did you investigate the lease at all in place as to what it covered?
I just reviewed the mailer and what they stated. They don't provide anything else, so that's all I have.
But you're aware that it is not a ground lease, Fran, are you not?
It seems that it's for the area and then the rent applied of the building.
Okay. Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Laurando?
Your page 3, you actually show the 2459, which is the actual rent for the entire property, correct?
That's what they have listed in the income expenses
And that's what would give it that 86,000 and change,
for the yearly rent, yes.
For the yearly
Annual.
rent. and yours comes out to less, comes out
Slightly, yes, yeah.
to 78,000. So, slightly. but
Yeah,
I'm saying it's
nothing to
pretty,
be,
but it's pretty comparable
Yes.
without having to do the split. Because they are renting the
Yes.
whole thing as a unit, is what I'm
Mhm.
saying. So it should
Yes.
be shouldn't it be dealt with as one unit if that's the way their lease is written up?
technically, we always have, just by our, I guess, instructions for car washes and stuff, we always have them separated by the store and the car wash, so that was kind of what was done here, even though when they send us the income and expense, it's all as one.
Would the difference on this one though not be that in this case they're renting physical, everything above the ground, anything below the ground would still belong to the oil company? Because when you rent it in this fashion, what you're renting is the upstairs, the downstairs belongs to the oil company. They have to replace them after a period of years. Is that not correct? There's a 25-year life, but they have to do it under the legislation then?
I'm unsure about the legislation in regards to, I thought the tenant did own the tanks on this one, because the owner isn't Esso or Max, so,
Esso gas, but I don't think they own the tank.
yeah. It didn't say in the property that there was separate ownership for the tanks through the owner versus the tenant, so.
Okay, we'll
I'm not
find
sure.
out from Rocky when he presents
Thank
them. I'm done.
Yeah. Mr. Pierce?
You've offered us some comps on the gas station car wash pad site rental. Do you have anything along this line that relates to cap rates?
We don't have any sort of additional evidence for cap rates for gas stations, no.
No? Okay. All right, no other questions.
Did you inspect?
This one, I've only been in here for reasons that weren't for inspection.
To get
Getting your
fuel.
gas.
To get snacks, or something on the way down.
I had you down for a Slurpee or something.
Probably. Didn't want to wait in the car.
Okay. No, thank you, that's all my questions. Mr. Newfield?
Thank you. The subject property is rather unique. I represented the property in an arbitration about 12 years ago, and it's the only time in my career I've ever come across a lease of this type. The property owner owns everything and leases all of it to the oil company. On top of that, the property owner retains the responsibility of cleanup at the end. The operator has to replace his tanks as required, but once they're in the ground, they become vested and the ownership of the property owner. It's a very, very unique situation, because typically what you find is that there'll be a ground lease, oil company or franchisee pays for everything, and at end of term, they gotta walk away and they gotta clean it up. So this lease incidentally goes right back to Texaco, so this is a Texaco lease, and then it ended up going to Esso after Texaco quit the market. And in our arbitration and dealing with them, like I said, it was unique because we never find issues like this. So as a result, everything belongs to the owner, everything is rented to the tenant. So the concept of the other improvements, they're accounted for in the lease already. Tenant's responsible for replacing them as required, but that's the lifespan. On the other side of it, of course, there's a registration on it in a Manitoba environment, and I've listed that on page 7. Impacted sites, obviously the oil tanks, and they have been in the ground a long time, dating back to Texaco years. So that would be the era of underground steel tanks. Don't know if they're double walled. I don't think when it first came in that they had double walled steel. That came in a bit later. So we don't know what's down there. And the last permit that was taken out for the tank was 2010. So that would have been a double walled time. I don't know if they're fiberglass now or if they're steel. But the lifespan, last I checked, was 20 years, which could be extended upon inspection. And I think the extension might be 5-year periods, I'm not entirely sure, but I know it's 20 to start. But why this matters, of course, is two issues. Is that, last year the assessor had a value of $201,000 on this additional amount.
Mr. Newfield, bring it
Oh,
up.
no, this is value. This has nothing to do with an argument, this has nothing to do with the decision, this has to do with depreciation.
Okay.
$201,000 last year, this year it is $264,000. So they're saying they went up in value when basically 20% of their lifespan, 10% of their lifespan, was gone. And they didn't get better, they can't say you got better tanks in the ground, it's the same old tank. So you don't get a better product that's cost more, it'll be, when it comes out of the ground, it'll be obsolete. So you have the same tank, you have to have at least an additional 10% depreciation on that, on a straight line basis. as well as the piping. The piping generally gets replaced when the tanks get done. Canopies, well, Esso's on a 10-year program last time we checked as far as canopy life. And generally they'll want that, they'll give you a small extension if they don't have their modern image program done when that is ready. To me, that really, none of this matters, because it's all covered under the same lease. $86,000 a year, covers everything. So we've applied vacancy, again, industrial, retail, the tanks in the ground, I think that's reasonable. Car wash is included in that. The non-recoverables on the statement are not $4,000, they're actually $2,000. We're gonna adjust our NOI upwards to $74,202. Structural reserve is a bit of a question mark for me, because I've inspected this property a lot, and we know what the history of the car wash is, but it's the tenant's responsibility to look after everything. It's the tenant's responsibility to change all this stuff. So the landlord's structural reserve is minimal. The tenant has to fix it all, and then they leave it when they're done and they walk away. Shortfall is high because basically the taxes are very high compared to the square footage, and that's what drives the shortfall. There's nothing wrong with the $13 number, it is what it is. So our NOI is $74,202. So the last issue to consider is the cap rate. Whatever cap rate you want to start with, whether it be retail, industrial, service, then we have to add in the concept of the impact, the registration, the impacted registration. I know I'm a broken record here, but I'll go over it again and again until somebody finally starts paying attention. The biggest problem with environmental registration is the ability to borrow money. That's what hurts you. And the ability to borrow money directly relates to the cap rate. People aren't lending money generally to impacted sites. It doesn't matter if you're guilty or not, nobody wants to be involved with it. And if you do get to borrow money, you're taking lower ratio loans, 50% rather than 70%, and you're gonna get a point or two higher in your mortgage rate. You're going to a secondary lender. No lender in Europe lends any more in impacted sites. At least half of the ones in North America won't do it. All the big REITs won't do it. They don't want them in their portfolio. Because everybody's gone to, and part of it is they think you can change the world, but these sites are still impacted. No one's curing them. We're simply saying our way of fixing the world is, well, we're just gonna ignore them. Maybe they'll go away. I don't know. But the downside on this is that if you borrow money that costs you roughly 2 points more in interest, that means you need 2 points more on your cap. Because your cap is just a method of repaying your mortgage. It's a calculation. It's direct relationship. And for years in our business, there used to be people who'd spout about stigma, it's 2 points. And it's true. There were a ton of articles written between the 60s and the 80s on stigma, and they pretty much fixed it at 2 points higher in the cap. We've changed all of our words now because we're much more environmentally sensitive, but we haven't changed our numbers. It's still gonna cost you 2 points more. The other issues to be concerned about is with the registration, if you were to sell, you don't even start with a phase one, you go right to phase two. And with a gas station, you're immediately hit with remediation. You're going to have to clean it up, which means a capital cost down the road for the cost of cleanup when you have an eventual sale. So that's driving everything down. Now, if you replace it with another gas station, maybe you don't have to do cleanup. But in this day and age, look at the gas station market. You're getting bigger or you're getting out. Used to be, Esso had a target of 3.5 million liters, and they wouldn't franchise you. Now that number's going up and up because you're either going big, like Safeway, Co-op, Costco, selling 12 to 20 million liters, or you're going independent to Mohawk Turbo at a lower amount. And while all this is happening, you're seeing the impact of hybrids and electric vehicles and closing down gas stations. It's fewer and fewer out there now. So this is what's happening in the market. So I think it's a real risk on the cap side to have these lands come back into the market. And now, particularly in the case of this one, Esso is not liable to clean it up. The owner is. So it's gonna come out of his pocket. In Manitoba law, there is a law that says that the original polluter has to deal with it. But we also have a contractual override. So who wants to go to court to fight that? You're just gonna avoid it. You're gonna price the risk in. So I didn't write this 9 1/4 up, but I think the person who didn't understand the full impact of being responsible for the environmental issues yourself. This would probably be a cap closer to 12%, but I'm not going to change anything. And last point I'm gonna make is, yes, I'm getting my soapbox on all this. We are under appeal for the last 4 cycles on this, because I'm having a difficult time getting my message across, and I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, but I'm dealing with the realities of the market. This is what I do for a living, this is what we're faced with when we have one of these sites, and the value is impacted. There's nothing nice about the issues here, it's just a problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
He didn't give us the final number.
Yeah.
I didn't, oh, yeah, well, because I wanted to change my cap, but, you know, I said I was gonna do that. 802,184,
Thank you.
rounded to 802,000.
Ms. Santucci?
Just because I reviewed some gas station contaminated things, I'm just curious, so this was from the provincial website?
Yes.
And do you know what stage they got to? Because you can be put on the list and not actually have to, like,
Well,
cure the land.
This registration I first found in 2007, and we reviewed it again when they changed their rules slightly, and they widened it, and that was on our page 7, and that's 2019 list. So the 19 list is wider than the 7 list. The 7 list is narrower, 2007, and it's on the 2007 list.
So do you know if they've proceeded from like a phase 1 to dig down deeper?
Well,
Any
there's
cost to
no
cure associated?
requirement at this point.
Okay,
But because it's continued operation and it's
Okay.
monitored by, obviously, they're all monitored for leakage now, and they're leakage detectors now, and the tanks, you can see, were replaced in 10, which I believe was an error when double wall was mandatory.
so they're not being forced to do anything immediately?
No, it would impact its marketability. So to market the site would require a cleanup, and I suspect that be a lot of excavation required and ground sanitization. There have been sites in the past where they've actually took a more natural approach, they said, leave it dormant for a year, and there's a new method of turning the soil over that's supposed to dissipate some of it. But these are hydrocarbons, so I don't.
But no associated cost to cure?
No, there won't be until it's sold.
Okay.
It's the risk. Everybody knows what the cost of cure is.
But we
so.
don't know the exact risk, it could be low.
Well, we came from the single wall era, so they have a pretty good idea of what's gonna happen with it, with the single wall tank era.
So you've given it a -5 for just that alone on your,
Well, that's just that's just an estimate, as like normally, normal properties have no impact whatsoever, so was just an automatic we do. Whenever we find a registration on the list, we do it, and I'm saying to you, I know that it's a far more serious issue because we don't have the clout to go after the original person who did it, because all we know, it's likely Texaco, and how do you go after Texaco today?
I was just wondering, for some of these, for the subject property, you have a location of 9, there's a building size of 4. I was just wondering how you came about some of these.
I've done a lot of valuation on gas stations, and the Appraisal Institute has some optimal numbers, and the optimal number is a corner location, at least 40,000 square feet, and a C-store and or car wash combination, roughly 5,000 square feet. You know, if you've been in there, you know this is a pretty small C-store, and the bigger the C-store, the more business you can do out of it. This one's probably doing I'm gonna guess 500,000 or 600,000 a year, and if you had another 1,000 feet, you could probably do about 1.3 million in sales out of it. So it is on the smaller side, and the year build, of course, just has to do with remaining economic life.
Okay. That's all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Page?
I have none, please.
Mr. Lorondo?
Yeah, so was the one that put the tanks in, right? In
Well, the
2010?
last tanks, yes.
Yeah, in 2010. They bought Texaco, did they not? To get the leases and the lands.
I thought Texaco went Chapter 11, and Esso picked up the assets.
So I mean, they got the assets.
Yeah, but not the liabilities. I thought it was Chapter 11, and I'm just trying to remember that they went and filed in the US to get Chapter 11 protection for their Canadian operations, and right after Gulf did it. And Esso, yes, Esso took them.
So on an impacted site, you give it a 5 right off the bat.
Yeah, immediately a -5, without thinking at all. We find a registration, we make that application, and it works out to about a 3/4 point increase. And in this case, I don't believe that's adequate.
Are you not double dipping when you give it another, bring it down another 4 for being a gas station?
No, that's only a 1 point drop, that's a 5 down to a 4. I'm only
Wouldn't that be picked up by the
No,
impacted?
no,
site?
that's nowhere near enough. It's designed as a gas station, which means if you want to redo it, you're gonna have to reconfigure it, that's where I'm going at with that. So a gas station generally is on the center of a lot. So you do a drive around. If you wanted to change it to a strip, you're building at the back. That's what I'm looking at there.
The year built 89, why does that drop it down?
It should have been more than that, but I didn't do this. It would have been, because these things have a short life, the drive-through car wash especially. I was saying earlier that car washes have 20, 25-year life. Drive-throughs are even shorter. It seems that they're never open when you really want to go in one, which is when it's cold outside, because everything's all frozen up.
But you said the tanks were replaced in 2000.
Yeah, I got the permit, which showed December 31st, 2010.
Yeah.
All it was, well, actually, I don't know if it was installed then, but that's when the new permit came out.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. That concludes 2544 Main Street. Do we need to have a break, or shall we do one more? Anybody have any preferences?
I'm good.
Okay, well, why don't we do one more and then we'll take a break. Okay, we're on to 278 Marion Street. I have that the issues under appeal are liability to taxation, amount of assessed value, and classification of property. Is that the case still?
I don't think, did I fill out that form?
You sure did.
You have it in front of you? Seriously?
Take
We
a
have
look
the
at it.
secretary
We'll
pull it
just
for you.
take a quick look.
What was
Yes.
I did, okay.
There was a oops.
New client, I didn't know what he had.
Do you want to take a look at it first before we proceed? or-
Yeah, no, I know that there is an issue.
There is an issue?
With liability, however, we found out that the tenant is vacating in May, so we're not gonna proceed on that
Can we
basis.
proceed?
But I'm just asked to be confirmed for now, subject to anyone changing their mind.
Okay, so first what we'll do is we'll ask the assessor to read the information into the record.
Is it just to confirm the liability
Are you just-
portion of it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then we'll proceed with value after that.
Okay. This is file number 19-461, roll number 0607505700. Address is 278 Marion Street.
And then,
Yeah, you do the whole
Yeah,
thing
go
now.
ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
You-
Sorry about that, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
So this
I
is
should say.
an office, converted house. We have a leasable area of 2,632 square feet. And for some reason, we do have an effective year built on here. It didn't come up when I printed this, but it's 1975, just so it's not the original 1945 year built. So if we turn to page 2, I have an aerial shot of a photo located on Marion Street. So as you can see, the physical appearances of a house. The exterior photo there at the bottom. On page 3, so no one's been in this property from our building for a while. These were just from a 2012 sales listing. So it looks like there's obviously some office space. It still has the look of, I think, a residential house as well. The rear view. On page 4, the request for information, the subject sale history, we have an older sale. Subject property leases, so we have a gross lease is what I determined. We have a monthly rent of $2,400 and a leasable area of 1,700 square feet for 5 years. If we turn to page 5, we have the income workup. So we've only accounted for a leasable area of 2,632 square feet. I know the gross area of this building is quite high. I didn't have time to inspect it, but I will be inspecting it after this when I have more time, just because there seems to be quite a difference between the gross floor area and that leasable area. So for the income workup today, we're actually only looking at the 2,632 square feet. We have a blended rate applied of $14.16. We have a basement space here that's coming in at $9.33. Just to separate that out there. We have a vacancy loss of 5.5%, expenses at 2%, shortfall at $7, and a capitalization rate at 5.7%. So we have rental comparables. I have 12 here. They average out about $13.42 and a median at $14. I tried to find ones closer to the subject property. Go through page 6 is the income value summary. Page 7 is the capitalization rates. 8 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts, and I'll go to the 2017 income and expense mailer on page 9. Just shows the rent they've received, the leasable area. They have some parking stalls. On page 11 just shows the tenant, the 5-year lease, and then what they're paying in the leased area. And on page 13 is just the start of my 2024 revision addenda. So I do have a recommendation today. I did look at the rent comparables and the subject property, and I thought the overall blended rate at $14.16 was a bit high. I revised the rate to be about $12.10 to be blended, and that would be the main floor, second floor, basement. Kind of fiddling with a lower basement rate and different rate on the main and second floor. So after changing, just looking at the rental rate, I had a potential rent of $31,856. The vacancy allowance changed to $1,752. The effective gross income was lowered to $30,104. The expenses at $602. The shortfall at it stays the same at the $1,013. And for a revised net operating income of 28,489 square feet. And then we'll use the model drive capitalization rate of the 5.7% to come up with a value of $500,000. So my recommendation today would be to reduce the 2020 assessed value from the $588,000 to the $500,000, and that falls in line more with what we did the previous cycle as well. So
Okay, and that's your NOI, I'm sorry,
my
28,
NOI is 28,484 square feet.
and your cap is stayed the
Stays
same?
this, I'll just use the model drives, yes.
Okay. Mr. Newcomb, do you have a response to that?
We'll carry on.
We'll carry on. Okay, carry on.
And that was $28,000, not feet, right?
28,000 for the NOI?
Yeah,
28,480.
Yes.
not feet.
Oh, sorry, did I say feet? Sorry.
Okay,
And then
or is that,
my presentation is all done,
presentation,
yes, thank you.
okay, Mr. Newcomb?
So, the first workup is the model, and
Yes.
you're suggesting a slightly lower rent.
Yes.
Now, you've got 2,632 square feet, and what did the owner claim rental was?
They have listed on the mailer, 1,700. This is varied, when I had looked at previous mailers. What we have on file is what the previous assessor
Well,
has
you
determined.
presented the board today 1,700 square feet, correct?
Yes, but technically the gross floor area is much higher. There seems to be some issue here with what space is being listed. And
Well, we're not asking about what
Yes.
technically could be done, and where you said you haven't inspected.
Mhm.
You've got 2632, the owner obviously has been in there, and now he feels 1,700, so, but you're staying at 2632?
Yes, since the
And the
last
difference is
inspection.
likely the basement, the way I look at the map?
Possibly, they may not include the basement. The last person to do the business assessment there confirmed all this, so that's just what I went off, what the person with the tenant dealt with.
Now, what standard would be used to include the basement as rentable space?
If they're using it for space, if they have offices down there, storage,
Then it would be deemed, and you have a basement rent then to coincide with that in your rent comparables?
I unfortunately did not include my basement rent comparable chart. That varies, I think the average was $8 or $9, depending on whether or not it was a bi-level basement or,
This was built as a house, correct?
yes.
And in 1945, what would you expect the basement height to be?
I don't know what the building, off,
Has anyone confirmed whether or not it meets minimum standard for leasable space?
I didn't see anything in the notes about that. That's just what the tenant told the person who had the business assessment in.
I understand, now, you're talking about going to look at it, I
I'd
think-
like to go look at it when I have more time, just because there seems to be an issue
Right.
with the space.
And you mentioned that the rent that you had discussed, page 4, now appears to be a gross rent?
It doesn't say whether or not it's a gross rent. I'm thinking it's at 1694 would be a gross, unless it's net, unless you know, I'm not sure.
Well-
Just what's on the mailer, I assumed it would be gross.
Right, they are saying 28,000 in income and 20,000 in expenses, so you're assuming it's gross?
Yes.
Those are my questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lorondo.
I'm good.
Mr. Page?
I'm good, so thanks.
I know that you mentioned your rent comparables, and was it looking at these that led you to make a recommendation on a lower rent?
I'm looking at the rents and then looking at previous buildings I had been in St. Boniface, kind of thinking what, based on the space, like what this would generate. I thought the 16 and the 17 seemed high in our model, so that's why I'd lowered it.
Okay, just based on your general knowledge
Yes.
and some of these rent comparables that.
Yes.
Okay, when you said these were close to the subject, did you mean proximity-wise?
Yes, I think the only one that looks similar to a house would be the comparable one we have listed as an office,
The one on
conversion?
St. Anne's Road?
Yes, and then just, I chose some ones on Marion that were, the comparable to is also an older build, comparables 3 and 4, to 80s buildings with like standalones, and then obviously like 131 Provence is a nicer building on the corner of Provence and Taché, so I didn't think that one would be
Right.
the most comparable, but it is located near there, so I just put the comparables in as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I guess I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Your comparable on Marion, 200 Marion, that's 1,300 square feet at 928. Is that one a house or what is it?
That
'Cause
one
it
I
was
just had
built in
listed as a
86.
building. It wasn't, it doesn't look like a house, it's just a smaller standalone.
But it's 1986.
Yes, for the actual year build. But we do have an effective age on this building of 1975. on the subject property, I had said at the beginning, unfortunately, when I printed it, it didn't print out like that, I'm not sure why, but in our system, we have a 1975 effective age.
What would have brought it up?
It would just have been a previous assessor going in there, basing it on their judgment of previous, like, there's no recent permits, but obviously things have been replaced since the building was built in 1945, mechanical, flooring possibly. I didn't have like specific details on the assessor's notes, but.
Did you pick these comparables then, or did you?
I did, I found, just through our list of St. Boniface sort of office comparables. Again, the ones on Marion would probably, like the standalone buildings would be most similar.
$8 on Provencher, 383, which is quite a very.
Yeah, they vary, the higher
Yeah.
rents would be in the 131 Provencher building.
But you don't know if it's 1,700 square feet like he's showing in his paper, or if it's,
No, the last person to do the business assessment there added them in for that leasable area and confirmed it with the tenant, so that's why I left it as the 2,632. Unfortunately with mailers, they can write, they can change year to year, so I went based on the last time there, what was decided.
okay.
And I'm sorry, when was it inspected last?
It would have been the tenant, I think it was, oh gosh, it was possibly 5 years ago when the tenant was added in. It wasn't recent.
Same tenant?
It would have been 2000, probably after 2015 with the lease, and that would have been when the business assessment was put in.
And the same tenant?
Yes, the turning.
Thank you. Mr. Newcomb?
Sorry, you were saying Turning Leaf was entered on the business rules.
That's who the tenant is currently.
Are they nonprofit?
I think we have them in as, it would be like an exempt nonprofit for business assessment.
Yeah, so they don't get charged taxes, right?
Yep.
So why do they care what size it is?
Well, we still confirm everything with the tenant when we go, just to make sure we have it correct on file for the realty.
Thank you. Sorry, I was thinking about that, like when you have an exempt property, you go like, I don't care what you put on it for value, no one cares. It's still zero. Sorry, okay, so I haven't had the chance to inspect this property, it is new to us, but I'm gonna make a lot of assumptions here, and I think I'm gonna be on good solid ground. When you have a house built in 1945 and you convert it to a revenue-producing property, you don't just change the date, the effective date, assume that you're actually changing it. Because houses built in 1945 have hallways that are this wide. That's the way they were built. And everybody in this room, some of us work more than others, will hit their head going up the stairs to the second floor because the stairwells don't clear. It's a story and a half. So the concept of turning this into an office and saying it's modern is ridiculous. And I'm sorry, I don't mean that in any derogatory sense. I think the system is ridiculous. The people are great, some of them, most of them. And that's the problem with trying to assess converted houses on this approach. The space is 1,700 feet. Really, to me, it doesn't matter what the size is, because they're not getting more rent for it. The whole house is leased. It's not divided into units. It's not earning more, simply because of the size. And basements aren't rentable, especially 1945 basements, which were built at a time of different code. And I'm gonna go out on the assumption, and I'm gonna take a gamble here and say that the height is probably 6 feet, 6.5 feet in the basement, because that's the way they used to build them in 1945, which is certainly not a leasable space today. On page 3 is their income, 28,800 gross. They're listing a number of expenses. So we went through these expenses, and some of these costs, like cable, satellite TV, of course, don't belong. In my mind, the insurance was rather high, and that may have included other things. And the property management, certainly. Well, the thing is, it's too high on a percentage basis, but no one is going to property manage this space anyway. It's always going to be hypothetical. What we ended up doing was We applied insurance, R&M and taxes, and reduced it, and our estimated net is $15,000. Looking at vacancy rates, now a property like this is going to have a worse vacancy rate than a modern rental property, simply because it's a converted house. Not desirable in the market. You know, you're not attracting the cream of the crop in terms of tenants, you're attracting people who are looking for cheap accommodations. So, this is what it is. We are applying non-recoverables. You see they have a great deal of them. We're only applying them at 5%. That's our way of stabilizing. Structural reserve, well, in this case, it's not just only the roof to be concerned about, but considering the property itself. I haven't inspected it, but St. Boniface soil is generally better than most parts of the city, but you have to be concerned about a foundation at this age in its life. And, but we've put in a standard amount. The shortfall, we believe this is the actual, based on the tax load at 1049. If it changes, the assessment changes, that'll change. But our NOI is 11,600. Capitalization rate. A few years ago, I used to do an awful lot of appraising on these sorts of miscellaneous retail office converted, and we generally found them to be going at about 2 or 3 points higher when looking at the income approach than a commercial purpose-built site, because they're just not generating the income that a site designed for it should. And you know, our study, no one tracks these. I said I used to informally track them a few years ago, but unfortunately my practice has changed somewhat, and I don't do this type of work anymore. There were a couple I was going to point out though. On page 38, this is a converted house on Jubilee, capped at 8.04. Two things though to pay attention on this one though, is it was 2,000 feet and it sold for 384,000, which is 170 a foot, considerably less than this subject is being assessed at, and that's upper floor area only. And it was professionally done, redone prior to sale to convert it from an office use to a salon. So it was a professional makeover. Another older one on page 39 is 243 Lilac, and that's Cafe Carlo, 1928. Now that one sold from the owner to the tenant, and that had an allocation that I made for the furniture, fixture, and equipment that came with it, and capped at 947. And again, $150 a foot. This is pretty much what you'd expect in and around that ballpark. But on the cap side, 8.75 is probably on the low side on a cap. That nobody's buying these as investment properties, and if they are, again, you're looking for a high rate of return. And think about this: if you're a small-time investor, why would you even buy this if you weren't earning at least $1,000 a month or more? And the sites, and that's what this site generates. So our value is $133,000, and I see no reason in the world to amend this or change it. This is just that type of property. The only other consideration one could have is to look at it on a per square foot basis and to look for converted house sales in the same condition. The two I showed you were superior, and they were 150, 170 a foot. I haven't done the work to look for converted sales, converted house sales in this area, but so I can't really speculate as to what they might be. I suspect, though, that they're going to come above $100 a foot, but I don't think they go as high as 150 a foot, and that's only an upper area space, not basement space. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Ms. Santucci?
Thank you. You said you didn't inspect the property. I'm just wondering how you determine the design layout, year built, quality sort of numbers for your capitalization.
Pure guesswork, which I'm 100% on so far, but we'll go out and look at it.
Okay,
And I did talk to the owner.
okay. So you had showed some, from your brief,
Just say, put it this way, I've never seen a single one that went the other way, where they raised the basement and widened the stairways. I've never seen it ever.
So you had mentioned per square foot for the Cafe Colorado about $150. So this one, if we use that 1,700, it comes out to about $78. I know we're trying to determine a market value here today, so you think that this property on Marion would sell for $133,000?
Well, no, I think when we're applying the income approach, that's what we're forced to look at. And the problem here is equity. If all the properties in Winnipeg, commercial properties that are done in income, what right does anyone have to step out and use a different approach simply because it's more convenient for them? It's much like when the assessor looked at the downtown parking lots and said, well, we're gonna get more money if that one's income and more money if that one's a direct comparison, so let's apply it. That's not fair. So you're doing income, you're stuck with income. I think I think though, that, yeah, on a square foot, it's gonna go higher, and, you know, probably above 200,000, but mid-twos, but that's not what we're here to do.
And then you're just saying, so the higher capitalization, there's a higher risk with this building, just,
Absolutely, the assessment department's parameters are completely backwards. The smaller the property, the greater the risk. And the reason that they're backwards is because no one has gone to the trouble to interpret them properly. What they're doing is they're taking a sale that's based on the direct comparison approach and saying, look at the cap rate here, really poor income, but it sold for, because it didn't sell for it sold for a different reason. So if you're actually selling something on the basis of its income, small is higher cap.
okay, that's all my questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Page.
No, thanks.
Mr. Milano?
Which ones did you bring for comparable, Mr. Newcomb?
For comparisons for rents, I have some numbers on page 4, and they're all properties you're going to hear today eventually, except for the last one. And the last one is the Randall Homes, which is a brand-new house on St. Anne's Road, and that's a first floor space at $13.61 for, well, not brand new, it's, I think it was.
It's 10 years old now.
Yeah, but it's the Randall Show Home, and it's a good quality construction. That's the lawyer space in the spare bedroom.
That was 13, but you're at 8.
Yeah, well, because that's that's very aggressively paid rent.
Yeah.
I mean, their actual paid rent is, as you can see, is like $5 or $4. That's what they're claiming. I wouldn't say the statement was done by a sophisticated party, so we have done some interpretation and increased that revenue.
Well, you tweaked it, it was 28,000 was the revenue, 28,800.
Gross,
And you got it down to 15.
28 gross,
Yeah.
20,000 in expenses.
But you tweaked it down to 15,
Right,
then you took off vacancy again.
correct.
and
We
you
we took
off-
it down by taking off property management, professional fees, cable, satellite TV, $1,284 that's not explained, and we kept in the taxes and repair and insurance. And I think insurance is a touch on the high side, but actually, insurance, which is generally for commercial property, is 18 cents a foot, but, you know, this is a wood frame construction, so I would compare it, I don't know how much my house is less than that, so I think that's a touch on the high side. The NOI could be $1,000 lower. What we're doing with though is we're
higher.
yeah, that's right, I'm sorry. We are dealing with what's been reported, and we can't take everything down and disregard it.
That's the number you used, isn't it? 28,000 with your new number?
For my
The
net
new
operating.
NOI ended up being what?
It was $28,489.
Yeah.
As the net, and mine was the gross.
Yes.
Yeah, her NOI ended up at 28. Yours was gross at 28, and then you worked it down to 15, actually down to 11,000.
Yeah, well, yes, it's after normal expenses, and, you know, the one to target is my shortfall, because if the assessment drops, so will the shortfall. So, that's a dwell angle argument. I love when I can talk about dwell angles.
Dwell angle. Yeah, but
It's a moving target thing.
we've got a moving target, but you're taking off the expenses from off the 28, and then you're taking them off again.
No, not at all. We're the only ones we're taking off in here are the vacancy costs and the shortfall related.
The
And
recoverables?
no, well, we're putting some of the recoverables back in that we took off on page 3. You can see that what we left in was 3,200 plus 2,450 plus 8,026. So we took off 13,676, which means, or we left it in, which means we took out 2,000 in property management, 3,000 in fees, 100 in office supplies, 800 for TV, and 1,200 for who knows what. That's what we took out. But then we put back in just the non-recoverables, which was only $756.
And then the shortfall of 1049?
Well, that's different, that's a different category altogether, that has to do with vacancy risk.
Okay, but no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a 10-minute break.
Sorry, I just want to confirm, you were asking for confirmation on liability and classification?
That's correct.
Correct.
I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Next on our docket is 650 St. Mary's Road. The issue is amount of assessed value. Ms. Santucci, when you're ready.
Thank you. This is file number 19-275, roll number 08000 528500. Address is 615 St. Mary's Road. This is another office that would be for converted house. We have an actual year built of 1946 and an effective year built of 1988. We have a leasable area of 1,702 square feet. If we turn to page 2, we have an aerial shot of the subject property located on St. Mary's Road. In the exterior photo, there's no interior photos, and I couldn't find any recent notes on the last inspection. The request for income and expense was received, no subject sale history, and the subject property leases, there's a rental income of $22,000 for the year, so I divided it by the leasable area to get the $12.93, and it was a 5-year lease. If you turn to page 4, I have the income workup for the property. So we have a rate of $16.92 applied to the above grade space and $4.34 applied to the basement. The note had just said for the basement that it was not leasable, so that's the rate it was applied for our model. And I have a rental rate of $13.34 per square foot. We have a vacancy loss of 5.5%, an expense of $2, and a shortfall of $7. When I printed this out, the capitalization rate was 6.2%. There was a bit of an issue. I probably should have reviewed it further, just due to the effective age. So that, based on our model, it should have been lower. So that's my error for not fixing that. And the estimated value for our income stream is $329,000. So for our renter comparables, I used the same comparables as the last property. And the average is $13.51, and the median is $13.38. On page 5 is the income value summary. And we'll go to the income and expense questionnaire on page 8. So it doesn't check off if it's fully owner occupied or gross or net lease, but it does provide us with the rental income, no expenses, And on page 10, they do have the annual property tax recovery, and since they didn't include the utilities in the front, I would have assumed it would have been net, but they've also checked off that property taxes are included, insurance, hydro, water, so the applicant, I'm sure, can confirm whether it's gross or net, but I just calculated it being at the $12.93 per square foot, and that would be for a lease, for a 5-year lease signed in 13 and ended in 18. Page 12 is my 2020 Board Revision Addenda that I've gone through, and my recommendation today is to maintain the 2020 assessed value of the $329,000. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Newcomb?
Yes, sorry, what then, was this all done by the model?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So you were just talking about something in the cap rate about.
Technically, based on the effect of your bill, the cap rate should have been lower, but it was my error for not fixing that, so it still generated at the 6.2%,
Oh, I see.
so.
And in this case, the dimensions of this, 1,702 square feet, where did they come from?
So we have 1,218 square feet above grade office space, and then we have 484 square feet of substandard basement space.
And did the owner provide a number?
These were the numbers in our system based on the original sort of building leasable areas from, I guess would be our cost.
Okay, so it does include some basement space, and, you know the scope of work that changed the effective age?
I didn't have a detailed explanation on it when the permits were done, but looking at the front of the building, it doesn't look like a 1946 actual year built, and I'm assuming there was interior work done is what was stated, it just didn't go into specific details.
Here's my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Mr. LaRondo?
No questions.
Mr. Page?
I have the-
And I have no questions. Mr. Newcomb, when you're ready?
Thank you. So this, I'm about to be made, we'll call it a liar, just severely mistaken. I said the last time that I've never been in a house that's been converted to modern, and this one has been. I had forgotten about this. And it's because this is owned by Randall Homes. So this is one of their early prototypes at adapting a house and converting it and modernizing it. So yes, they did change the space substantially to have a modern stairwell widths and heights. And when you go in the house, it does look like it was built in the 80s. So there was some conversion on it. Of course, they didn't change the frame and the foundation, so you know, the concept of an effective year is you know, subjective and arbitrary. I would call it a 1946 house that has had its utility improved in several areas. Okay, so that's the only one I've ever found. It's only been one. Now I can restate that all over again. The 1,700 feet, I think, was supplied by the owner in a previous mailer going back about 10 years. And it's always been a whole house rental, so we never really cared about what sort of square footage it was, because it was gonna always be based on money, not square feet. So there's where the city model fails, and if you look at apply the city model to something, and then apply a rate that doesn't reflect the actual rent, you're going to have a mistake, and that's where their mistake is. The other issue is on the statements, is the person who made this up treated it like there was taxes were not recovered, and I see in the statement they're saying there is a recovery, and my familiarity with the house is that this is basically a net rent. There are some costs that aren't recovered, but the 22,000 is the rent. So I've just changed my number to reflect that. We're using a 7% vacancy, it's just miscellaneous and office. And keeping in non-recoverables at 5%, because I know that Randall Homes does incur non-recoverables on this house. Keeping the structural reserve as it is and the shortfall as it is, so my NOI increases to 18,121. Again, looking for a cap rate on a converted house is really looking for trouble. There is no such thing. It is much better than the last one. I arbitrarily would select a slightly lower rate. Actually, no, I do have a good rate. I never even thought of it. I've got the one I told you about at 848 Jubilee, professionally redone. So I do have evidence, and that's 8%, that one came out at. So my value is 226,513, rounded to 227,000. And that was a correction of the rent and a cap with a comp that might be somewhat reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Santucci?
Another question. So you're saying that when they renovated it last, it was built to kind of be an office then? That was-
Yeah, the first tenant, Randall Homes approached it on the basis of they wanted to experiment and see, would we take an old house and renovate it? And they did it, and they were thinking of using it for their own office, and then they ended up renting it to a financial planner for a while, and it's been through a few tenants.
So the design layout, I know you had marked down, so that was kind of reflected in your change of cap rates and
Yeah,
Okay.
well, and more to the fact, like, the person that did this hasn't been in the house, and I've been in it a few times. I guess, opening my mouth, I remembered I did have a cap of a professionally remodeled home on Jubilee, so that seemed fair to me.
Okay, that's my only question, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Page?
I have none, thank you.
Mr. Lorenzo?
I have none.
Mr. Newcomb, could you just repeat to me what your rent per square foot, you made an adjustment there?
Yes, I went to 22,000, which is the lease amount, which is,
So 22,000 net income?
yes, yes, that's correct. It works out to about $12.93 a foot.
About 1293.
And I was just looking over previous years, and it was 12 in 2 years ago. So I know I'm being consistent.
All right, and no other questions from me? Item number 6 on our agenda, 619 St. Mary's Road. Ms. Santucci, when you're ready.
Thank you. This is file number 19-276, roll number 08000-527-500. Address is 619 St. Mary's Road. This is also an office and sort of a house conversion. This one, we have an effective year, an actual year built and effective year built of this 2008. And we have a leasable area of 3,941 square feet. If you turn to page 2, I just have an aerial shot of the photo. It's actually just south of the property we just looked at, and just the exterior photo on the front. And I don't have any interior photos of the subject. On page 3, just shows the rental, the request for income information. Subject sale history, there's a sale that's quite dated. And subject property lease, we have a rental income of $48,000. If I use the leasable for our department, it works out to about $12.18 per square foot, and that's a 4-year lease. So for our income workup for this property, we have a blended rate of $13.95 per square foot, so that is coming in higher than what they've reported on the income and expense. That's possibly due to the age of the property. And we have a vacancy loss at 5.5%. Expenses at 2, shortfall at $7, and an overall capitalization rate of 5.55%. to give us an estimated value of $890,000. So looking at my rent comparables, it would be on the higher end of my average and median. And on page 5 is the income value summary. Since we've gone through most of this, we'll go to page 8, which is just the 2017 income and expense questionnaire. And on page 10, they've filled out the tenant, the lease, and some annual tax recoveries. I'm not sure which expenses or if there's anything included. It looks to be a net rent to me. And I'm assuming the utilities we've paid for by the tenant, they're not recorded on page 8. And my recommendation today is to maintain the 2020 assessed value of the $890,000. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Newcomb?
Thank you. So in this case, page 4 by the model,
Yes.
and you're including the basement space?
Yes, it's the 1,170.
Right. Anybody been down to inspect it?
Recently I couldn't find any notes.
Your cap rate study, chart on page 6, we got a section there for converted houses.
No, but it would, for our OFS is the lowest, is the
OFS.
5.55, so that would be the lowest for our offices.
So that represents a wide range of property types, OFS.
Yes.
Those are my questions, thanks.
Mr. Lorando?
I keep hearing converted house. What year was it converted from? I thought it was built
It was,
that year.
we have it listed as a converted house just because it looks like a converted house, but it was built to be an office with the look of a house. So I'm not sure if that's due to maybe neighborhood plan, possibly, because it is located within other residential properties. So.
But it's not a converted house.
No,
It
it's-
was built as an
No, it
office
was
space.
built as, yes,
It was built as an office
Mhm.
space.
just looks like a house.
You haven't been inside.
I have not been inside, no.
I'm gonna leave it alone.
No more questions?
Yep, I'm done.
Mr. Page?
I have no thanks.
Okay. And I have no questions. Mr. Newcomb?
Same owner as the last one, Randall Homes, and the same issue to fix up the rental rate. Yeah, we accepted 48,000, and so that changes my net income to 48,000. That's 1734 a foot because we're only using the upper levels. Basement does not count. Same vacancy and non-recoverables at 5%. I know that there are extensive non-recoverables. And my NOI changes to 40,124. And I'm gonna use the 8% cap again, because that's the best I got in terms of representation. So that's, comes out to 501,550, rounded to 502,000. Been in it, inspected it, built like, to look like a house. This was the second Randall shot, and I think this was planned originally for their office. So build a house that shows off what they can do, use it for their office. And they outgrew this, and then they built across the street, or just down the street, their even larger home. So page 6 are some interior pictures, and at the time I was in there, it was the office for TAN FX. And it has sort of a home feel to it. Bottom of page 6 is the basement. That's the basement that the assessor wants to assess. Possibly because it's maybe it's a studio, drum and practice studio, I don't know. But that's what's down in the basement. It's not rentable. It's not finished, doesn't meet any sort of code whatsoever. And it's an improper way of appraising properties, is to add the basement space. And the thing to consider is the industry standards. Now, if this were listed by a realtor, they wouldn't be allowed to use the basement. It'd be a violation. and that's the community standard. So our value is $502,000, and I guess at this point, you would consider this house, it's actually surrounded by residential users, and this is a property that is likely, you could put it on the market and sell it as a house. And you could probably easily get $200 a square foot for it, if it were, some work was put in it to put it back into house condition. The conversion skimped out on the kitchen and the bathrooms and amenities and for the office. So you'd need $50,000-$60,000 of work to put in it, but you could sell it for $200 a foot as a house easily. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Newfield. Ms. Santucci, any questions?
I guess my only question is for the 8% cap, you're dealing with a 2008 build versus the previous one, which was 1940 build with renovation, so you still feel comfortable with the 8%?
Well, I think we're dealing with such a unique property type. If one is trying to split hairs and find different cap rates for houses being used for commercial purposes, there aren't going to be any. I think the cap speaks, I think on this particular property, we should probably have done far more detailed highest and best use, and probably discovered that selling it as a residence would be the highest and best use, and then subtract the conversion costs. And I've presented that to you right now just based upon my local knowledge, and it coincides with my number.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Page?
Have no
Mr. Romero?
questions.
No question? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move to 401 Carwash. When you're ready, Ms. Santucci.
Thank you. This is file number 19-4513, roll number 06060914000. Address is 401 Carwash Boulevard. This is an office building built, actual year built 1948, effective year built 1980. And we have a leasable area as 3,181 square feet. If we turn to page 2, I have an aerial shot of the property located on Provencher. I guess would be closer towards Archibald versus Taché. Exterior photo, so as you can see, it doesn't look like your typical 1948 build. It looks like it's had some exterior renovations. I don't have any interior photos, unfortunately. On page 3, just a request for information, response received, subject sale history, few dated sales, and subject property leases. So it states partially owner occupied gross leases. So from what I got from the mailer, the first floor and the second floor are owner occupied. So that wouldn't be a true lease in the sense of it's the owner. And then of the first floor, it says there's a smaller portion, 286 square feet, rented out for $525 a month for 3 years, and that would be a gross lease of $22.03. And to work that back, you would probably take $6 to $8 of cost to occupy off that, possibly, if you wanted to net it out. On page 4, we have the income stream. So again, this one we have is a converted house. We have a rental rate applied of $15.31 and a rental rate applied of $10.85 and a blended rate of $14.14 per square foot. Vacancy loss of 5.5, expenses at 2, and shortfall of $7, and an overall capitalization rate of 5.7%. So the estimated value is $709,000. My rent comparables, I've used some of these from the previous properties. So on Provencher, we have a building closer to Taché, which would be comparables 1 to 4. A building closer to the subject property be comparables 5 to 8. And just a few on for 9 and 10 on Marion, and then again, comparable 11 would be closer to Taché. So the ones closest to the subject range from $8 to $12. So they would be lower than the subject, but the overall average from the area is $12, from my fund from St. Boniface, and my comparables used here is $12.54 and a median of 13. Page 5 is my income value summary, and then if we flip to page 8 is the start of the 2017 income and expense questionnaire submitted. So they have some rental income, so 0 space vacant, 2 tenants, some parking stalls. Page 10 is where I got the tenant information, just showing the owner-occupied space, which they've checked off as not owner-occupied, but going through previous notes in our system, it was determined it was. And I think they have on page 12, the net income of, what did they put here? $4,903. Again, this would be a bit skewed just because the rental income, a majority of it, I'm not sure if it's just put towards the owner, their income, and then just the small portion being towards the tenant. So I didn't look at that in comparison to our model. And my recommendation today is to maintain the 2020 assessed value of the $709,000. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Newcomb, do you have any questions?
Yes. Valuation page 4, was this done by the model?
Yes, that'd be model drive.
And the rents below it, did you select these?
I selected these ones, yes.
And are any of them converted houses?
No.
And are you aware that on February 8th, 2018, an assessor in your department admitted that the square footage of 3181 was incorrect and had known it was this department knew it was incorrect since 2009?
I didn't have a note on that one.
You're aware that at that particular hearing, the assessor recommended a reduction in value based on a revised square footage?
I didn't, when I looked at the previous one, I didn't notice a recommendation unless I looked at the wrong property for this one.
No, you're not misquoting here, but were you aware that at the hearing, the assessor said the square footage was incorrect, too high, and requested a...
I had no notes on any of that, sorry.
Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Mr. LaRosa?
I'm good.
Mr. Finn? Actually, I did, when you were going through your presentation, I did see that there seems to be a discrepancy in the
Yeah, I
square
just added
foot.
them up, so.
2349 versus your model of 3181, so that's,
I'm wondering if the 832 is basement space? Would that be considered, I'm thinking, because if we take away the 832, we get the 2,000.
that's right.
That
Yeah,
seems
so
to be
I'm
the
I'm
case.
guessing the basements, is it, if the previous assessor stated that, was it due to the basement then, I'm guessing?
No,
Oh, no, okay. I'll look into that one.
you just added
Done.
enough wrong.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then we'll hear from Mr. Newcomb.
You're going to have to trust me on this. I'm not talking about past decisions. This property, many people have probably heard of taking legal action against the city of Winnipeg and the assessors. This was the property that made me decide to do it. At this property, the hearing, the assessor requested a penalty for inconsistent utilities from a previous year. The board granted it. After it was granted, he came and said, oh, and by the way, I have a recommendation for a reduction because our square footage was wrong. All at the same hearing. Now, I asked the board to stop right now and throw this out. They shouldn't have continued. And that's when I decided this has to end, that this was abuse. Now, my appeal to the board, municipal board on this, I wasn't mincing words. I said that the assessor abused his authority, and the assessor failed to disclose exculpatory evidence. So, I'm saying all this because there's some history here, and now you can see today that it hasn't been corrected. At the hearing, the assessor admitted that they knew the square footage was wrong, going back to 2009. And still went ahead, asked for a penalty, and knowing that it was wrong, and the property owner was going to get a reduction, but they were gonna take it away, even though he deserved it, because there was an error in the roll. That drives me crazy. Now, I'm telling you all this because I need to be clear and transparent and give you the history on this. The property, we went out and looked at the site, and it's a mix of space. There's a main floor area, there's upper level space, and there's a big space in the basement. The owner has it at 2349, and that's the number we're using. That's what he's submitted and has always submitted in his brief. The amount that the assessor brought forward is saying it was in error was actually 2877 square feet, but he did admit he had an error. Now, the board order didn't speak to it because it was a, well, you need to have seen me sometimes when I get a little upset. I was in good form that day. They should have had a security guard there for me, this was a total abuse of authority. So now it's come back and it's being reassessed right back up there because the square footage is still wrong. Incidentally, the number from the previous appeal was 710,000. It was all based on an error, which was admitted. So, okay, I've said my intro, let's just go back to the property. That's all we care about now. Now, there is a space that's considered the owner's space, and it's not so much it's the owner's space, it's a family. There's a extended family, and different portions of the family own and different portions of the family rent. They're not the same legal entity. They have two separate numbered companies for their, one for their owning of the real estate and one for the operation of their business. They do have an outside tenant, leasing a very small space, and it's a shared space, $727 a foot. So we're using $727 for the lease space, and we're using $10 for the rented space, and one of our great supports for it was the previous property you heard on Marion, 278 Marion, which is at $890, which arguably might be $10 too. It's a good number. The other property you heard today, the converted house, which is $12, is in superior condition and was really upgraded. This one has not been upgraded. It's in terms of anything related to the utility of it, it's just been refinished, redecorated. That's all. And the pictures are through it, and now the basement space that's on at dispute on page 7, top of page 7. This is the basement space that is in the city assessment roll that the assessor said should be taken out. Hardly surprising. So we have this at a potential income of $22,709, the same numbers we discussed earlier. We're using the same 8% cap that was for the other converted house on Jubilee. This is not as good as the one, not as good as 615 St. Mary's, not as bad as 278 Marion. Therefore, the 8% rate is being applied, value of $219,000. As an alternate use to return, and I was talking about highest and best use and returning to where it came from, that's not an option in this case. The conversion is gone, it's done. The cost to convert back to a residential use, if we're considering a highest and best use on that, is much too costly. It'd be a few $100,000. because major portions of this infrastructure related to running a house, like kitchens and bathrooms, is now gone. Whereas the other one, the one on 619, has that potential, and be clear on which ones can have it done to and which ones can't. So that's our value, $219,000. Thank you for being patient with my explanation of my events of 2 years ago, which were so stressful.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Ms. Santucci, do you have any questions?
Just one for the second space, the 286 square feet. How did you work back the gross to that 727 net? Just because I had the gross at about $22.03.
Okay, well, so I got 525 monthly. Yeah, $22 on the gross side. So to work that to net would indicate we had used so that's about $34,000 in expenses. So now I'm gonna go look through the expense side. Let's give him the $15. Well, my calculation right now is getting me about 26,237 in expenses. Which is $11.17 a foot. Yeah, I think there's an adjustment required there, because my calculation, I'm getting about $10.83, call it $11 on that space. So that's about, instead of 2,079, that's 3,146. So about $150 higher, $1,070 higher on the NOI. So forgetting about all those other expenses and just adding $1,000 to the NOI, $18,500. Very quick calculation in favoring the higher value, not the lower. With yes, my corrected number would indicate an NOI of $18,500 and a value of $231,250, rounded to $231,000. That's my read on the statements. I see your point, though.
And then my only other question was, in regards to the basement space. So you're saying, I guess, in regards to me going out and possibly changing this, so you're saying that the 832 is that basement space that reflects page 7 of your brief, and then that would be our one premise that would be reflecting that area. That's kind of.
Yeah, well, all the way through its history, they've reported 2,349 square feet, and going back to the mailer at dispute was 2,349, and at that point, they had presented the same thing, is that they had ID Fusion, which is essentially, I think the company controlled by the father owns the building, company controlled by the son runs the software company, or vice versa. They have different directors, other different directors as well. And then the DD Notes is third party.
Okay, I was just wondering, because we always put a nominal rate on the basement, so I was just trying to figure out if it was
Well,
the 830, was this space?
Because we've turned into multi-tenanted space, and I'm just looking for my breakdown here on space. I've got, okay, I think I've got,
Because I can look into fixing that, but we would always put a nominal rate on the
Right,
basement.
right.
I just don't obviously agree with the 1085, and
Right.
if that's what is reflected in that
well,
on page 7.
I have two other numbers here. I have the plan area of 1517, and then I have 533 square feet plus another 299 square feet on a different level.
Okay.
So I think one is upper, one is basement. There is some basement space. It's, normally I wouldn't even consider it rentable, but they have set it up, and it is shared space with their tenant, put an additional restroom down there. That's what their number is.
Just because I'll look into changing it, so I
Sure.
wrote that down. Thank you. And that's my only question. Other than that, thank you.
Mr. Page?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Longo?
I'm good.
Okay, so you're committing to go out and take a look at
Yeah,
this?
if that's
like
what the
post
basement space reflects, we normally for owner occupied do put a nominal rate on, but obviously the $10 doesn't reflect a nominal, like,
And we're
you
also
know.
talking about a multi-tenanted site, so when the rules change too,
Mhm.
even if
So
you
then
go to Beaumont.
if it's not leasable, yeah,
Right.
so I'll have to review it and, but unfortunately I can't put weight on that $10 that I've applied then, if that's what it looks like down there.
Okay, thanks so much.
So that's so nice, you didn't ask for the penalty when you're doing it too.
Well, there's information on the mailer, so.
Next time.
Okay, and our final property today is 2300 St. Mary's Road. The issue is amount of assessed value. Ms. Santucci.
Thank you. So this is file number 19-614, roll number 08020954000. Address is 2300 St. Mary's Road. So this is an office building, built in 2012, 2013. We have 2 ages on that. I'm not sure if it was built in portions. And then we have a leasable area of 4,995 square feet. On page 2, I have an aerial shot of a photo on a triangular lot located on St. Mary's Road. Farther down, past the mall, the exterior photo there. I don't have any interior photos that possibly could have been taken during the new construction. Just have notes stating that the new construction was done, permit values, and the quality of the construction. So for the income and expense information, we have received response, subject sale history. I'm assuming that would have been more of a land value sale prior to the build. And then for subject property leases, it's fully owner occupied. Page 4, we have the income stream workup. So the rent's coming in modeled at $20.17 per square foot, which I found to be high based on rent comparables for also new buildings. The average is about $18.92, a median at $17.76. So I'm gonna make a recommendation today to reduce that to $17.25 per square foot, so which gives us a revised potential rent of $86,164. It also revises the vacancy to 4,739 square feet and a revised effective gross income of 81,425 square feet. I think the expenses changed to $1,628, shortfall's the same, and we get a revised net operating income of $77,873. So we'll use the 5.5% capitalization rate and come up with a revised value. So I'd like to recommend to reduce the 2020 assessed value from the
From 1 million.
$1,647,000 to $1,403,000.
1403.
Yes.
Mr. Newcomb?
I really disagree with the cap rate, but I'm going to take it to the owner if that's all right and ask them. Because I know you had talked about
I
it.
just reflected more of a rental.
Yeah, and
situation,
I
so.
know you had spoke to Aaron earlier about it, and I never got a response from that.
Okay.
But
So-
if that's okay with you.
you'll
Okay.
accept it, but obviously you
Subject
need
to-
to.
Subject to possibly
Yeah.
appealing it further, I guess, so that's fine.
So we're occupied anyway.
And so I guess then that concludes our hearing today. Thank you, Mr. Newcomb, and Ms. Santucci for your presentations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.